Hello to everyone, greetings. Welcome to session 4 of the Emerald Choral Academy. I am Gary Cannon, Artistic Director of the Emerald Ensemble, a professional choir based in Seattle. The Emerald Choral Academy is a series of interactive webinars during which our area's leading professional choristers will reveal their personal tricks of the trade to community singers. These webinars will then be made available freely to singers across the world via the internet. The Emerald Ensemble is very grateful to our generous donors who have made this project possible, particularly For Culture and the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. We encourage anyone participating or viewing this webinar to make a donation as you are able at emeraldensemble.org. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and join our mailing list to hear about future sessions of the Academy and the other activities of the Emerald Ensemble. This webinar is being recorded. By participating, you are granting the Emerald Ensemble permission to share your contribution. Your microphones and cameras will remain off for the duration of the presentation. You can ask questions to the presenter by typing into the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. And periodically, I'll interject to field your questions. There will also be a designated Q&A period at the end of the presentation. You recently received a confirmation email that included a PDF handout. You may wish to access it now. There's also a link to the handout in the chat window. This session's instructor is mezzo-soprano Melissa Plagemann. Ever since I first met Melissa at an audition 15 years ago. Yeah, I know. And Melissa has always remained practically my go-to mezzo for just about anything since. She's one of those few rare singers whose skills are equally adept on the opera stage, as an oratorio soloist, as a recitalist, and even as an ensemble singer, which is, of course, the hardest one of those, isn't it? We must agree.
It really is, absolutely.
I believe you. Melissa also teaches at Western Washington University and Pacific Lutheran University, and her topic today is survival tactics for long rehearsals. It is a pleasure to introduce to you my friend and colleague, Melissa Plagemann.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I guess it's sort of evening. Survival tactics for long rehearsals. When Gary and Scott first asked me to do this, I really thought of in-person rehearsals, which of course we're not doing right now for the most part. So a lot of my presentation can apply to both online and in-person rehearsals when we finally get back to that, which we're all hoping happens sooner rather than later. And then at the end, I'm going to do a few things that are more specific to online rehearsals for those of us who are finding Zoom rehearsals to be totally exhausting. I personally taught on video chat all day today, so it definitely I'm tired now, and I will be more tired after this is over, but there are little tricks that we can do to keep ourselves energized, and especially as we're transitioning from maybe working online all day to going to an online rehearsal at night and, give ourselves a little break from being on screens all day. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And Gary, tell me if you can't see my slides when I get there. But here are our slides. And if I hit present, ta-da!
I see slides.
Fabulous. So you see, I have the very clever title, Why Am I So Tired? Survival Tactics for Long Rehearsals. And I've kind of divided this into 3 sections. First, what we can do during a rehearsal to stay mentally engaged, which makes us feel less tired even if we've had a super long day. And then what we can do to prepare our body and our voice before a rehearsal to make us less tired, and then also what we can do with our online rehearsals that we're having. So there are lots of things with rehearsals that are out of our control, right? We cannot control the length of the rehearsals, and a lot of times we are only meeting as groups once or maybe twice a week, and so our rehearsals are going to be 2 or 3 hours long, and We don't get to decide that. Conductors like Gary get to decide that. Because a lot of us are avocational singers. Most of our rehearsals are going to be in the evening after we've already lived a full day, right, and gotten really tired. And we also can't control what has happened in the rest of our day, right? Maybe our kids are running around and having trouble logging into their online learning. Maybe we've had to put out 25 fires at work that day. And so oftentimes we're exhausted by the time we get to the start of a rehearsal, much less the end of a rehearsal. And we also don't get to control, obviously, what kind of chair we have to sit in for rehearsals, right? So a lot of chairs that we sit in for rehearsals kind of encourage bad posture and slouching and making us feel even more tired than we already are. But there are things that we can control, and you will see as I'm going through my slides here, I obviously was hungry when I was putting my slides together because a lot of them have to do with food. The first one is make sure that you take some time to eat dinner before rehearsal, and if at all possible, I know sometimes we're rushing right from work to get to a rehearsal that starts at 6:30. We get off work at 6 o'clock. We're driving right to rehearsal. We're maybe scarfing something down in the car. But if you can put something in your body that has some complex carbs and some protein in it, that's going to help to get you through the next 2 or 3 hours of your life that you have to get through. Also bring snacks to rehearsal, because even if you've eaten before the rehearsal, I know for me, if a rehearsal goes past the hour of like 8 or 8:30, I'm going to be hungry again. And I'm a late night snacker myself. And also bring your water bottles to rehearsal. I mean, I know this is common knowledge for all of us, but we all need for our voices to be hydrated. And after we've been talking all day, we're even more dehydrated than most of us spend a lot of our time doing. So try to drink water before your rehearsal, but also bring a water bottle to rehearsal to keep yourself hydrated. Other things that are in our control are the way that we prepare our bodies and our minds for rehearsals. We're going to do these breathing exercises in the second part of this webinar because I'm not using slides for them. I'll just be on camera. But we're going to go through some breathing exercises. That's in the handout that I sent out. If you've read through the handout, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to you. It'll make a lot more sense when I go through them visually. Mental engagement during rehearsals, I think, is the most important thing. If we go to a rehearsal and we're already feeling tired, it's really easy for us to just go and sit at rehearsal. And just sitting at rehearsal and not really being engaged for 2 or 3 hours is going to feel really exhausting. Whereas if you're really engaged, and that's largely just in your own control, all the way through the rehearsal, even when a conductor is working with another section, which is mostly what we're going to talk about, that is going to help you get through a long rehearsal, both mentally and physically. And then the last part of the webinar, like I said, I got a request on Facebook yesterday to talk about some Zoom specific tactics for rehearsals. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So when your mental engagement during rehearsals, let's say you've gotten to rehearsal, you have sitting down, you have your great posture, you get out your music, you sing through, and you're singing through. This is a little clip from the Bach St. John Passion. And let's say we're singing through, and we get to a page like this that has lots and lots of little black dots all over it. And things might fall apart, and the conductor might stop and say, let's work with, say, the sopranos. Now, if you're not a soprano, you have probably 5 minutes or so where the conductor is not working with you, and it's really up to you to stay engaged and work on your own things during that time. I've highlighted the alto line because I'm going to assume we're all altos for today. So we're singing through. We get to the end of this line, the conductor stops and he says, let's work with the sopranos. The first thing you can do when you're sitting and the conductor is working with somebody else is definitely know what your text means. Now, sometimes we're singing in English. This isn't an issue, but even if you're singing
Oh, Melissa, I think you're paused or your audio has cut out. I see your screen save and I see that your mouse moving, but we're not hearing you.
Oh, you're not?
Oh, now I do. I heard you
Oh.
say, "Oh, you're not."
Oh, I'm sorry. What's the last thing you heard?
The last thing I remember was you had just shifted to this particular slide, and were mentioning that while other people are being the focus of the rehearsal, it's a good time to go through the translation. That
Absolutely. A
it's not
good
an
time
issue.
to go through your translation. So this is a translation of that whole chorus from the St. John Passion. We were only singing those first three words. And of course, you can look up what those three words mean at the beginning of your score, or if you have a translation from your conductor. Or you could take that time to kind of read through the whole translation of the chorus and see what you're singing about. This can also save you a lot of time that you might spend practicing on your own at home. If you do a lot of this in rehearsals, it cuts down on the amount of time that you're spending on that when you're practicing, then you can practice other things. And go ahead and write in your translation and use tricks from Gary's talk last week that he gave, which he did say that often there's a lot more space in between systems of music on a page than in between the individual parts. So it might be best to write your translation, obviously, where you have the most space. You can go ahead and write that in. It's a good idea to, when you're doing things while the conductor is working with another section, do things that are going to take up just enough of your consciousness that you can keep one ear open for when he says, "Okay, everybody," and goes back and you have to sing again. The first thing you want to look at, if the conductor's working with another section and you're like, okay, well, I know that I didn't sing that totally correctly, so what can I go through and look? And you're going to look for places where you might have a tricky interval. So like here where I've highlighted, you're going from an A flat to a D, which is a tritone, which is famously the hardest interval to pick out and sing, especially when you're sight singing. And then you want to look at the other parts and see, okay, well, where am I going to get that note? And if you look here, I circled the alto and the tenor line, but you see that the basses are also singing a D there, and the basses have sung Ds all the way through the bar leading up to that. So it might be great to listen to them, and even better if the conductor happens to be working with one of the sections that's sharing your note there, because then you can kind of hum in your head and get that interval down. You can certainly, get closer than you did maybe the first time. The second thing you want to look for, obviously this is Bach, so there are going to be places where there are lots of runs, and this is an example where there are lots of runs. You want to look at those long runs because those long runs are things that pop up when we're sight singing, or even when we've seen a piece before and we look at them and we just see like a wall of black notes on the page and we have no idea how to approach it, right? And in Bach, almost always you're going to have these little things that I've circled called sequences, which is for these 8 notes, the shape of the notes, the shape of the phrase stays the same for the next phrase, but it moves up a step. And then it stays the same for the next phrase, but it moves back down. Yeah. So one of the things you can notice in your sequences, you want to break them down because now you're only dealing with 8 notes at a time rather than 24 notes, right? You can also see that the third time you sing the sequence is exactly the same note for note as the first time you sing the sequence. And then the second time is just 1 note higher. So all of a sudden, that phrase, that long run, becomes much easier to deal with. And then you want to look at your little set of 8 notes there, and you want to see where are there skips? Where does the run change direction? So if you look carefully here at the very end of the sequence, you have a skip down of a third. That's the only skip that happens. Da, 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 da. And we look for where it changes direction. This particular run happens to change direction a lot. So it goes down and then up and then down and then up and then down. So instead of having one straight scale, up or down, we look at where things change direction, and then we can apply that. Once we have a good idea in our head of how that first section goes, we can apply it to the second section. And this all might take, 2 or 3 minutes, where as the conductor is working with the sopranos on their even longer run of 16th notes, by the time he comes back to us, the altos, we already have looked at it and we already are that much closer. Yeah. So it saves everybody time in rehearsals, and it keeps you really engaged and gives you something to do, because I always fall asleep when I'm doing nothing watching TV at night. But if I'm reading a book or knitting or hanging out with friends at night, I'm awake no problem until 11 o'clock. Whereas if I'm just sitting and doing nothing, I'm asleep by 9, right? If we can keep ourselves engaged in doing something, even if we feel tired when we get there, just giving our mind something to do. So you want to practice your notes by humming, but you're going to hum in your head, because you don't want to annoy your neighbors by humming along. And certainly if you are maybe humming the wrong notes, you don't want to annoy the conductor by humming your part along when they are trying to work with a different part. And humming in your head, hearing the notes in your head, is really the best ear training, because when we're ear training, it's kind of a misnomer, because yes, our ears hear the pitches, but really we're training our brain to hear those pitches and know where they are. And so if you can hear a melody clearly in your head, you can absolutely sing it no problem. And that is my little spiel on staying engaged in rehearsals. So if anybody has any questions about that, let's go ahead and do a little Q&A, and then we'll do the breathing exercises.
I haven't seen any questions come through yet, but folks, feel free to type through questions or in the chat. Instead, then I will just thank you, Melissa, on behalf of all conductors everywhere. for inviting singers to be thinking actively through the constant rehearsal, and I think you're exactly right that that's a key factor to maintaining stamina through the rehearsal mentally, that you have something to do and think about. All right, I'm looking for questions. No questions yet. So I'd say let's proceed ahead, and feel free to type in questions, folks, on this last section too, and we'll get to them later. Thanks.
All right. So I'm going to get up. I apologize for moving my computer during our webinar, but I'm going to move this back and stand. How did we decide this was going to work best? Like so, I believe. So this is a set of breathing exercises that we can do to kind of get our bodies ready to sing. It was passed on to me by a masterclass that I sang at with a singer named Rosalind Plowright a few years ago. She was a very famous soprano for a long time, spent probably 25 years just traveling around singing all the big dramatic soprano roles. And then when she hit about age 55 or 60, discovered that her voice was changing. And so she sought out a new teacher, and now has a really active career touring when we did those things, touring as a character mezzo. How about people who talk? Oh, we'll get to that in a moment. Yeah, so she ended up studying with a vocal instructor in Sweden named Anna Sims. And these are some breathing exercises that she developed, and then we were all given permission at this masterclass to spread this information far and wide. Anna Sims is, or at least she was still active when I sang for Rosalind a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. She, about 40 years ago, was involved in a really serious accident involving fire. I'm not sure of the exact details of the accident, but I believe it was like she was opening her apartment door and there had been a gas leak. And so she opened her door and a huge fireball just came at her, and she was burned over 90% of her body. And she also lost about 90% of her lung function as a result of this accident. And she had been a professional singer, and the doctors all told her, forget it, you're never going to sing again. And she developed this series of breathing exercises and was eventually able to, against all odds, build her lung capacity back up to 100%, which is amazing. And then she has since passed this on to lots of students. I apologize for those of you who printed out the document. This is a document that Rosalind sent me, and it's all in, I think that might be Comic Sans font, and it's also all blue. And I keep meaning to retype it in black and a normal font, but every time I see it, it's just sort of charming to me because I know that Rosalind typed it up. So I've left it that way for now, but I know it can be a drain on printer toner and all of that if we're printing it in color. So we're going to go through all of these exercises. All of the exercises to go through take about 20 minutes. Very few of us ever have 20 minutes before a rehearsal. So even just doing one or two of these really energizes your body. You'll find if you do the exercises along with me at home, you will find at the end of it, you are out of breath and you're tired and you're sweaty. It's sort of like working out before you do a rehearsal. So the first exercise is just a simple, I'm going to stand back here. Gary, let me know if you can't see me. The first exercise is going to be just a quick inhale through the nose, a quick and energetic inhale through the nose. And as we do that, we're going to lean to one side. And then think about making a small hole with your lips, but not by puckering and causing a lot of tension, just letting your air out through a little pinhole in your lips. Slowly painting a big rainbow across the sky. Now, it's totally fine if when you lean, if when you're bending over, this arm has to bend, your outside arm has to bend to get to that shape, that's fine. When you get to the point that you can straighten it, go ahead and straighten it. Then when you're coming back, you want to time it so that you're using up all your air by the time your arm gets down to your side. And if you're doing this in front of a mirror or in front of a computer monitor, as the case may be, you'll see that when your torso gets to upright, you're not going to follow your arm the other direction with your torso. You're just going to stay upright. And then as your arm finishes descending, think about your shoulders being relaxed. And the result of this, if we do it 2 or 3 times on each side, is that you'll start to feel this expansion here on the side of our lungs that we really want to feel when we're singing, and also that we spend all day kind of compressing when we're spending all day sitting in front of a computer screen, right? So we're going to breathe in, a nice energetic breathe in, and then slowly blow the air out. When you're doing this on your own, a lot of people find it interesting to time themselves or count, and they just to know how long their exhale is. And you'll find that the more you do this consistently, the longer your exhale will take because you're taking in more air and you're using it more efficiently. So one more time, let's do that side. The other side, and then you just are going to feel when you get to the bottom, you'll feel this side is nice and lifted, and then you'll do the other side just to balance out. I believe the handout says 3 times on each side. I think 3 times is probably a good number. If I only have 5 minutes before a performance or a rehearsal, I will do just that exercise, and I find that just that gets me feeling lifted, and my intercostals all feel like there's space between them. My rib cage is all expanded. I think that just sets you up for really good singing. The second exercise, and I don't know why this is not divided into 2 exercises because there really are 2 parts to it. So we'll break it into 2 parts. But this big X exercise, you're going to start with panting like a dog. So you'll take an inhale and then, and it says in the handout not to inhale in between. Some air is going to come in between just because you're your core muscles are relaxing in between, it's going to allow some air back into your lungs. That is okay. You don't need to worry about you.
Melissa, your sound has cut out again, and now video is stalled. Let's see. I hope the rest of the attendees are enjoying like me. Oh, maybe she's noticed.
What? Can you not hear me?
Correct. Yes. You. It says your network bandwidth is low. I don't know if that appears to everybody as well. In any case, yes, you were talking about the breathing exercise and the fact that during the pant exercise, you will take in a little bit of air.
Yes.
And that was the last thing that I heard.
Yes, and don't worry about it if a little, I know it says in the handout not to inhale. That just means don't inhale actively in the middle of your panting. A little bit of air coming in is actually good and what we want to happen. And then there are 4 consonant combinations that we do very energetically and engaging our core muscles just to warm everything up there. And that is a KS, a PS, an F, and an SH, sh, and an F. And we'll do that 3 times each with a T in between. So, and you'll see, if you have a hand on your stomach, you'll feel it moving, right? And I find on that as well that I am taking small inhales in between, just not actively thinking about it. And then at the very end of your 3 KSs, your 3 PSs, your 3 SHs, your 3 Fs with T's in between, you're going to do a little combination of just the letter T, 2 quarter notes, 4 eighth notes. So, and you do that 3 times and then let it out. So all together it's and then you can just let the air out. You'll find if you don't use these muscles very much, you'll feel it by the end of that small thing. And then this is the big X part of the big X exercise. So it's very similar to the first exercise that we did, except instead of bending over to the side, we're going to make a big X with our body. Now, there is a whole book written about how spending time in this position every day is really good for our self-confidence and the way we present ourselves to the world. So give yourself a second in this position, and then you're going to bend over. And no, this is not a yoga exercise. It doesn't matter how flexible you are. You can bend your knees as much as you want, and your back should bend forward so that you are touching, or, if you only get down to your knee, that's okay. Gary, can you still hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Fabulous.
You can't see down to your knee, but that's all right.
I'll back up a little bit.
That's okay.
So it'll be the same kind of inhale that we took in the first exercise, which is a strong inhale through your nose, and at the same time you'll come up to your X position, and then a slow through a small hole again as you come forward, and again bend your knees as much as you need to, bend your back as much as you need to. It's not about how flexible you are at all. So we're going to do, you would do 3 times on each side and blow out all your air as you come down. And I think it says something in the handout about bending your back like a cat. So feel free to feel like you're rolling over. You don't need to be, this is not a flat back exercise. You can just come down. And if you're not very flexible and you only get to your knees, that is okay. The point is to kind of compress everything here as you're letting your air out, and expand it as you're letting the air in. That is the big X. The next one, warming the finger, has my favorite inhale trick, and that is if you put your hands right below your rib cage and let all your air out. This exercise starts by expanding your rib cage, dropping your diaphragm, but not letting any air into your lungs. So you can see your rib cage all expanding. You might not actually see very much happening at all, but you will feel it for sure. And what happens when you do that is if you're not going to let any air into your lungs, all of these muscles, your core muscles down here, are going to suck in. And the only way that you can let air into your lungs from there is by relaxing those out, which is really what we want to do when we're breathing in anyway. So then you breathe out, expand your ribs, then let the air in, and then put a finger or a hand in front of your mouth. I'll bend down so you can see me. And you're going to open your mouth and let the air out, and you're not going to blow the air out, but just enough that you feel the warmth of your breath on your finger. And again, you can do that, time yourself and see how long it takes. By this point, you'll be a little out of breath. So if you've done all the exercises before this, you will definitely find this to be shorter than the blows that you did in the first few exercises. But it will also get longer with time. And there's something about having control over how fast the air is leaving your body, but also having your mouth open at the same time, that is much more difficult than if we're blowing through a small hole, right? We really have to control that with these muscles here so that our lungs don't just collapse and blow all the air out. You do 3 of those, and then our last exercise is the humming exercise, and that you're going to want to have something big and heavy. Kitchen sink is great. A grand piano is great. Another person is great if you do this as a partner exercise. But we're going to kind of pull back against something and collapse as we exhale. So something that won't tip over when you do that. This chair might tip over, so I'm not going to lean back against it with all my weight, but if you are against a sink or something that is very solid, you can really pull back. So this one starts with the same inhale, that same letting the air out, expanding the lungs, then letting the air in. So, oops, sorry. And you'll notice, if you just try that, you can really feel all these muscles sucking in and then having to release to let the air in, because that's the only way that they can make space at that point. So you do your inhale, and then you're going to exhale or sing. This is a singing exercise, just on whatever note is comfortable for you, a hum. And as you use up your air, you're going to collapse down. You can go as far into a squat as feels comfortable for you. You don't have to go into a squat at all. The important thing is that you feel these muscles across your back expanding. So let all your air out, expand your rib cage, let the air in, and then my air is not lasting very long at this point. But again, you can time yourself. You can notice when you get toward the end of your breath, if things get a little shaky. You don't need to do anything to fix that. You're just going to notice it, and then notice it the next time you do it and see if it's different. So that is Anna Sim's breathing exercises, and I would be happy to take any questions about that.
We have just a couple of questions here, and I have several of my own if nobody else wants to drop in. Attendees, though, you have priority. So if you have questions, then you can keep from having to hear my voice. One thing that has been mentioned is that the big X, the power pose, apparently some of the research has not been replicated about the, making you feel better intrinsically. So be aware that we're not endorsing it scientifically as a psychological aid, I guess.
Yes.
The one thing that was mentioned earlier too, about folks who will talk to their neighbor during someone else's, this is during the rehearsal, will talk to their neighbor and then get called on and say, well, we're just talking about the music. Do you have recommendations of how to go about conferring with your neighbor that won't disrupt anyone else?
This is always the problem, right? I mean, I think because I've been guilty of this, 90% of the time when we say that, we weren't really just talking about the music, right?
No, clearly, no.
What? No.
Right.
But I think if you're engaged in trying to figure things out on your own, you're probably not going to be talking to your neighbor, first of all. And then really anything that you need to confer with your neighbor, whether it's, I've been in situations where it was maybe just the two of us on a part and we wanted to make sure we were singing the same vowel. And so we would just quickly check in about the same vowel. But really, I think we can all just admit that most of the time we're probably not talking just about the music, or maybe not about the music in a way that needs to be talked about right at that moment, right? We can save that for later.
For break time or after, or for
Yeah.
some other communication. Yeah. Good. We do have a question about the breathing. And that is, if you would review once again the original breath sequence with the air out, then the rib expansion, then expanding the rib cage, those 3 steps. Can you review that again? I actually found that I was doing that while I'm sitting, and
It
I
feels
suppose
weird, right?
I'll actually switch on my video. So I actually found, but now let's see. There we go. I actually found one that it worked pretty well in that it made me have better posture as I'm sitting in this, office chair. The let the air out, and then just naturally my back wanted to align better.
Right.
And would you review those steps for us?
Sure. So it's just, you're just going to put your hands right at the bottom of your rib cage and just let your air out quickly, like blow it all out. And then when you have no air or very little air in your lungs, you're going to expand your rib cage as much as you can without actually taking air in. So you can, and then you open open your mouth to take the air in. And what that does is it kind of creates a vacuum in your lungs, so that when you are taking air in, all of these muscles are just going to relax and get out of the way, and you'll feel them doing that naturally, because you'll definitely feel when you expand your lungs or your rib cage without taking any air into your lungs, all of these muscles are going to kind of suck in, because then they have a vacuum to fill as well. So they're going to suck in, and then you'll feel them relax even without thinking about it when you breathe in.
I find as I do that when I'm the middle step of expanding the ribs, dropping the diaphragm, some air will come in, and I presume that's all right. Is it the kind of thing where ideally less comes in the more familiar your body is with the exercise?
Yeah, and definitely you will either close your mouth or close your glottal area, so that you're preventing air from coming in. But if a little air comes in, especially at first, that is totally fine. You just want to focus on expanding the ribs rather than taking air in. So expanding your ribs more than the air is filling up that space.
Gary, we have a question in the Q&A. Do you ever keep rhythm by tapping a foot? What's a good replacement for that in performance when you don't have visible movement?
Yeah, I absolutely keep rhythm in my foot. And I think every video of me ever singing, I keep time in my body, especially when I'm doing ensemble singing. But I find definitely, I'm tapping my toe right now. You can't see it. Tapping your toe inside of your shoe so that you can't see it is the best way. And that's what every choral director I've ever had has told me to do. Because no one's going to see that moving inside your shoe, right? Personally, I have to say, watching somebody tap their feet has never bothered me. But I also totally understand presenting a united front as an ensemble and not each individually doing that.
I wanted to ask too, these are some fantastic breathing exercises you've showed. And what I like about them, is, especially, well, many things, among them is the focus on preparation before the rehearsal in
Mm-hmm.
order to ensure the body is well poised for success during the long rehearsal. And
Right.
these things can be done during the break too. Are there any of them, like we're talking about the one we were just talking about, the work I found interesting sitting. Are there any others that you would recommend or you could adjust during the rehearsal process itself? If
Yes, I
there's
mean,
12 seconds of pause, how to reset, or what breathing exercises would you recommend in that circumstance?
yeah, I think certainly when you're around a bunch of people, if you're going to do any of the big arm ones, you're going to just necessarily want to get in a place where you have lots of space, right? If you're on a break. But doing that, expanding the ribs and then letting the air in is something you can do from a chair during a rehearsal, I think. Like you probably can't do the whole warming the finger exhale, but you can do little snippets that you can do from your chair.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to talk about this in the Zoom specific thing coming up too, but really what is the healthiest way for our body to be is to change positions a lot. So I'm going to talk about good posture and good sitting position and all of that, and that is all important, but it's more important that your body is not staying in the same place all the time. And so many of us spend our lives doing things that require us, especially right now, to be in one place for long periods of time, that even just changing position in rehearsal can open up some blood flow where it was blocked before and give you a little more energy.
That might be actually a good answer to another question that's just come up, but I'm interested in other thoughts, which is about suggestions for standing rehearsals,
Yes.
particularly if you have foot pain, which can exacerbate the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I am gonna go through a standing posture in the next section. So let's wait and do that, and we can address any issues that
Great.
come up.
Great. Let's go straight to it then.
Okay. So this is our reality now. We spend lots of time in front of screens, right? And you might find that you are spending all day in front of a screen because of your job or because of your schooling or whatever. And then you get to a point where you also have a 2 or 3 hour rehearsal at night where you're also going to be in front of the screen. And the biggest thing, well, there are many things that can make us tired about that. One of the biggest things is not having our monitor at the right height. So you can see me right now, my computer is on a music stand that is raised a little bit so that I can look straight into the camera. I've noticed with a lot of my students, I have them stand to sing, and I noticed that their computer, not everybody has music stands lying around in their house like a house full of musicians do, but I noticed that their computer is like on their desk or on their bed or whatever, so that when they're standing they're really looking down. That is going to be really hard to have good posture, and it's going to be really tiring if you have to look down at your computer. So anything you can do during the day and at rehearsal to have your monitor at eye level, and especially at a rehearsal where you're not necessarily going to have to do a lot of typing. If you have a laptop, raising that up so that you're raising the monitor where it needs to be as opposed to the keyboard where it needs to be is going to be really helpful. Another thing that gets really tired is our poor eyes, and that is partially from looking at a backlit screen all day. And I have a pair of these blue blocker glasses, but I have to say they don't have very good or any control of of reflection. So I tend not to wear them just because my vanity gets in the way. They might make more expensive pairs that do a better job of blocking reflection from the screen, but I just don't like wearing them because you can't see my eyes. But if you wear glasses, it's really important during the day when you have a break, and certainly during rehearsal and online rehearsal when you have a break, to take your glasses off and then do some eye exercises, because what makes our eyes so tired is that the screen is a set distance away and we're focusing on that set distance all the time and we're never really looking away. So, I mean, just exercises like you would do for your whole body, but just with your eyes. So start by doing some rainbows, holding your head in one place and just moving your eyes back and forth. Do some circles, and you'll notice during these rainbows and circles that just like when we're doing vocal sirens, there are probably some spaces within the circle, some places within the circle where you notice that the movement of your eye is not totally smooth or it's getting stuck somewhere. That is totally okay, and you don't need to do anything to fix it. Just again, notice it and notice how maybe the more you do it, that tends to go away. You're going to do some X's, so look up right, down left, up left, down right, and then go to a window if you don't have view of a window from where you're working or rehearsing. And like I was talking about before, the screen is a set distance away. There are little muscles inside our eye sockets that are controlling where our focus is. And that's why we're able to focus on things that are far away and things that are close up. So the window that I can see out of right now, I can see trees way off in the distance. I'm going to focus on those. I can see some trees and houses in kind of middle distance. I'm going to focus on those. And I can see some plants in my garden that are very near. I'm going to focus on those. And just go back and forth between those just to give your eyes a break. That is super important. Then posture. As I said, what is most important for our body is that we're changing positions, which most of us are not doing nearly enough during the day, even at the best of times, and not in these COVID times when we're spending all day on Zoom. So I am on a bouncy exercise ball right now. I find that's a really good way to keep my body moving while I'm teaching. So I tend to sit on this when I'm teaching. Obviously, we can't sit on that all the time. So let me just go over quickly some standing and seated posture issues. So there are 3 things you want to think of when you're standing. First of all, here, I'm going to move this back so you can see the length of my leg. I have a yoga strap, but a belt or anything would do, or even looking at the seam of your pants. You want to hold this like it's a plumb line on your hip, and notice if the end of it is hanging over your toes or over the middle of your foot. It should be straight down through the center of your bumpy bone on your ankle. It has an official name. I have a student who's a massage therapist who told me it today, but I have already forgotten it. So you just want it hanging all the way down, and you'll notice that your weight is going to be on your heels, not that you're going to be leaning back, but more on your heels than on your toes. Yeah, and that's the best way to stand. You also want to take a look at your feet. I know you can't really see my feet. One of the biggest advantages that we have right now is that we don't have to wear shoes all the time, and our feet are really happier when we're not wearing shoes. So you see I'm in bare feet, but even socks are great. You want to give your feet, because there are so many nerve endings down there, as much stimulation and different textures to feel as possible. It's sort of like saying that it's best to keep a baby barefoot as long as you can, because they are learning, and we will also, our bodies will learn lots of information just by what we feel in our feet. So we might as well take advantage of this time and just be barefoot all the time. You want to stand with your feet hip distance apart. Most of us think that our hips are much wider than they are, so your hips are not this wide. Go for putting your feet right underneath where those bony parts of your hips are, straight down. And then you want to make sure that your feet are pointing straight out. Now, what this means is that the outside edge of your foot, if you were putting it against a wall, would be flat against the wall, which means for most of us, our toes are going to look like they're pointed in a little bit, and it's certainly going to be more pointed in than we spend most of our time when we're standing, because most of us naturally turn our feet out when we're standing. So turn them in. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel your feet hip distance apart, and then put your weight mostly in your heels. Now, lots of us, when we're standing, if we stand at, say, a kitchen counter for a good deal of the day or a standing desk, a lot of us tend to stick our pelvis out this way. This is exaggerated, but you'll notice even just a little bit pulling it back, and it might feel very weird. Now, when we think about standing up straight, a lot of us think about pulling our shoulders back and sticking our chest out, which is not great either. And what you want is for your sternum, if you put a pencil or any kind of straight implement against your sternum, you want the tip of the pencil to point straight down and not out like this. So for most of us, that's going to mean pulling our sternum in more than we're used to. Yeah. And what you'll notice is if you stand with your chest out and take a deep breath, you're going to feel it mostly in here. But if you pull your sternum straight and take a deep breath, it's much easier to feel your breath all the way through here. Yeah. And like I said, the biggest thing, and I know you mentioned having foot problems, and I mean, I would say probably the biggest thing if you have foot problems is finding a pair of shoes that's going to be comfortable for you to stand. But certainly if you are standing in a choir performance and you're standing for a long time, I think everybody's feet hurt by the end of it. And I would say just any chance you get in between songs, you're going to move your feet a little bit. No one's going to care. It's going to be okay. So it's very similar, our posture. I'm just going to get a chair. When we are in a chair as to when we're standing. Let me move this back so you can see the chair. Yeah. So when you're sitting in a chair, we tend to slump backwards to the back of the chair, right? And certainly if our bodies are feeling tired, we're going to slump backwards. Roll forward on your pelvis so that you feel your two sits bones pointing straight down at the floor. Most people in most chairs, this will allow you, especially if you're sitting forward on the chair, allow you to have your feet flat on the ground, which is also helpful. For a lot of us, rolling this pelvis forward is also going to cause us to stick our chest out. So same thing, put a pencil there, roll back, and then you're going to put your hand back here on your neck, right on that bumpy vertebrae, which is C7. It's the very top of it's where your neck or your back and your cervical spine meet. You have that bumpy C7. Put your hand right on that and then feel like there's something attached to the back top of your head. And it's just going to pull your head up and back. And bonus points, as many double chins.
I think the audio has cut out again. Oh, this looks like you can hear me though.
A rehearsal.
So, I hear you now. The last words that I heard, and I remember them well, were as many double chins as we can.
Yes, as many double chins as you can get. And
I felt like I was seen there.
I know some of us don't have to work very hard to get our double chins. I have to work less and less hard in these COVID times. But as many double chins as you can, and then raise your eyeballs to the level of the horizon and let your neck follow. And you'll find that's, if you're thinking about keeping your sternum straight, sitting on your sits bones, that's going to feel pretty different than how most of us sit most of the time. You also will find if you're in front of a screen or reading music on a stand in front of you, that after a few minutes, you've returned to this. So especially when you first start doing this, you're going to want to check in with your body. But the good news is you've just changed positions, which is good for you. So that is my little spiel about online rehearsals.
And it applies much to much more than just online rehearsals,
Yes.
for that matter.
Yes, I think it definitely does.
We thank Mary Ellen, who either knew or researched the name of that ankle bone.
Yes, that's totally what it
external
was
malleolus or the
Yes,
lateral malleolus.
External malleolus is what you want to line up.
Well, we have another question then about sitting in a chair, asked by Marilyn, who I happen to know is taller than the average humanoid. And how do you deal with a chair that's too short, so your knees end up aiming high?
Right. I mean, I think the best way to adjust for height is to adjust how far back on the seat you're sitting, if you have a little freedom there and the seat is deep enough. If you sit back more, you can still be on your sits bones. You can still have your sternum down. You can still have your neck, and your legs will be closer. There's not a whole lot that we can do if we're just too tall for the chair that we're in. But one of the things you can do if you know you're going to be in the same chair all the time for a rehearsal that you're going to is bring something to sit on to boost you up a little bit to sit. And I know tall people don't usually think about having to boost themselves up, but sometimes we just need to make room for our legs.
Excellent. Oh, thank you. So a couple of follow-ups. You were talking about the C7 bone. Are you trying to actually adjust that or do something with that, or is it just a base point?
No, that's just where you're putting your hand. So you don't actually have to do anything with the C7 at all. Imagine that there's a little string attached to the back top of your head, and you're going to pull it diagonally backwards. So the C7 actually just stays in one place. It just gives you kind of a reference point so that when you raise up, there you are.
Cool. Another comment, you had started out, I guess we're coming full circle. One of the first pieces of advice that you offered to us was to eat before rehearsal.
Yes, everybody eat.
Yeah, saying that now a balance of protein and carbs is helpful. That eating only carbs will make one sleepy. So with that comment in mind, I'd follow up. Sometimes when you only have a brief period of time, is there anything that you have found useful that has that protein, or that you just keep with you, or in a bag with the scores?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing to just keep in a bag and not think about, and I just throw it in my purse, 1 or 2 in my purse, are those, just protein. Find a protein bar that you like. That usually has a good balance, depending on the kind you get. Usually has a good balance of complex carbohydrates and protein that will fill you up.
And it's light, easy to carry around.
Yep.
I've also found it's useful to have like fruit during breaks, to have a little bit of fruit, apples or oranges or something that gets the blood sugar kind of back into for those of us that can do that sort of thing, little fruit in between during those breaks, and using those breaks to really, really stretch and get the body up out of the chair and moving and walk around the room.
Yeah. I know I always make the mistake in rehearsals of using my whole break sitting in the chair chatting with people. And then I get to the end of the break and I'm like, oh, I should have gotten up and walked around. So learn from my mistakes. Get up. Do your chatting while you're standing.
It's hard for us to learn from our own mistakes, but much easier to learn from someone else's. Thank you for confessing. I think we've addressed all the questions, and thank you very much, Melissa. This has been fantastic. I have learned so much.
I'm glad.
You get to a point as a professional musician, singer, and conductor where you think, all the breathing exercises, you've seen them all. And these were almost entirely new. And
and I don't know if Anna Sims just has not been interested in, she doesn't have any books out or anything like that. I guess I haven't Googled her, so I don't know. I don't know how much of an online presence she has at all. I think she taught most of her career before the internet was really a thing. So I think a lot of that is kind of just passed on to her students, and then from there.
Teacher to teacher, as it were.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for teaching us for this. Thank you to all of our participants today for your questions, your contributions, your attendance. You can help to create more sessions of the Emerald Choral Academy by donating at emeraldensemble.org. The next session will take place on Monday, October 12th at 6 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. On that occasion, Michael Bennett will provide a singer's introduction to the International Phonetic Alphabet. 3 of my favorite words, especially in that order. Probably one of the best tools that a singer can have. Registration is already available, again, at emeraldensemble.org. I hope you can join us. In the meantime, thank you again, Melissa. Thank you, Scott. I am Gary Cannon, and on behalf of all the Emerald Ensemble organization, I wish you good physical, mental, and musical health. Thanks again.
Thank you.